Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tin Man's Corner Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm kicking off my Midnight Terrors reaction series for you. And the first one I'll be reacting to today is three most disturbing true horror stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag. Okay, here we go.
I grew up in the countryside, where the nights were as quiet as they were dark. Our nearest neighbors were a good mile down the road.
Just wanted to point out that that's actually a cool looking farmhouse. I wouldn't mind living in something like that. But anyway, let's continue.
And most of the surrounding land was farmland or dense woods. When I was a teenager, I hated how isolated it felt. But now, as an adult, I sometimes miss the stillness of it all, or at least I used to. It was the summer I turned 16 when this happened. My parents had left for the weekend to visit my grandmother, leaving me home alone for the first time. They trusted me. I wasn't the type to throw parties or invite friends over without permission. To be honest, I was looking forward to having the house to myself, staying up late watching movies and eating whatever junk food I wanted. The first night passed without incident. I stayed up until 2 a.m., scrolling through my phone and binge-watching some trashy reality show.
Hey, if I was staying home by myself, I wouldn't throw no party either. I'll be doing like he's doing, but instead of reality shows, I'll probably look up some crazy action or sci-fi movies, but that's just me.
I finally fell asleep on the couch in the living room, wrapped in a blanket. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was pouring through the windows, and everything felt normal. That evening, as the sun started to set, I went outside to feed our dog Max, who we kept in a fenced-in area behind the house. The air was warm and still, with the occasional buzz of cicadas breaking the silence. I tossed Max his food, gave him a quick pat, and turned to go back inside. That's when I noticed something strange in the field across from our house. The field belonged to a neighbor, though it had been abandoned for years. It was overgrown with tall grass and wildflowers, bordered by a rickety old wooden fence. About halfway into the field, I saw a figure standing completely still. It was a woman. At least, I thought it was. She wore a long, pale dress that moved slightly in the breeze, and her dark hair hung loosely around her shoulders.
Makes you wonder, you're living out in a secluded area, and there's no neighbors in sight. Why is this woman out here? Anyway, let's just see what happens next.
She was facing away from me, staring out at the horizon. I froze. There was no reason for anyone to be out there, especially not at dusk. Most people in the area knew the field wasn't safe. The ground was uneven, full of hidden holes that could easily twist an ankle. I thought about calling out to her, but something about the way she stood, so perfectly still, made me hesitate. Instead, I watched her for a minute longer before retreating inside, locking the door behind me. That night, I couldn't shake the image of the woman in the field. I told myself it was probably nothing, a neighbor taking a shortcut, or someone out for a strange evening walk. Still, I made sure to double-check all the locks before I went to bed. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to Max barking furiously outside. His deep, booming barks echoed in the quiet night, and I could hear him pacing back and forth in his enclosure.
Oh, don't tell me that girl found out where he lived. Oh, no, your dog is trying to warn you, dude. You need to be prepared.
I groggily got out of bed, figuring he'd spotted a raccoon or stray cat. But when I looked out my bedroom window, my heart stopped. The woman was back, standing just outside Max's fenced area. She wasn't moving, not even when Max lunged at the fence, barking and growling like I'd never heard before. She was facing the house this time, her head tilted slightly upward, as though she was staring directly at my window. I dropped to the floor, my pulse racing. I crawled over to my nightstand and grabbed my phone, fumbling to dial 911. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered that someone was on my property, trying to stay as quiet as possible. They assured me an officer was on the way. For what felt like an eternity, I stayed crouched by the window, too scared to look again. Max's barking continued, sharp and relentless, until suddenly, it stopped. The silence was deafening. I forced myself to peek over the windowsill, heart pounding in my chest. She was gone. The officer arrived about 15 minutes later. I explained what I'd seen, my voice shaky. But when he searched the property, there was no sign of anyone. No footprints, no evidence someone had been there at all. He assured me it was probably just a trespasser and offered to patrol the area for the rest of the night.
Well, I'm glad that this officer was kind enough to ease that guy's mind and patrol the area. But really, no evidence of footprints whatsoever. Something tells me that she's either clever of covering her tracks or she's a ghost. But I don't know. Whew, that's spooky. Man, I'd be like this guy. My heart would be pounding out of my chest if I saw somebody at the window.
I nodded, too scared to argue. But I knew deep down that what I'd seen wasn't normal. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Lack of sleep, overactive imagination, maybe even a weird dream. But when I went outside to check on Max, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a dead bird lying in the middle of his enclosure. Its wings were spread out, and its body was perfectly intact, like it had been placed there deliberately. Max, usually full of energy, was curled up in the corner, trembling. I had no idea how anyone could have gotten inside the fence without me hearing. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept every light in the house on, jumping at every little sound. When my parents came home the next morning, I told them everything. My dad walked the property with a rifle, but like the officer, he didn't find anything unusual. My mom tried to comfort me, saying it was probably just a drifter passing through. I never saw the woman again, but the unease never really left me. Even now, years later, I can't look out at an open field without feeling a sense of dread. Sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up and hear Max's barking in my head, sharp and panicked, as if he's still trying to warn me about something I don't want to see.
Oh man, that would be terrifying. But if he's saying that it is impossible for somebody to get into that fence without making any noise, she was probably a ghost that was able to walk right through to spread out a dead bird. I mean, that's another crazy thing too. A dead bird just happened to be lying in the dog's fenced-in area with wings spread out. Oh man, that's almost like a omen right there. That is spooky. I don't know what else to explain it as. Mysterious, that's for sure. Let's get on to the next story.
I had always prided myself on being cautious. Growing up in a small town where everybody knew each other, I had heard plenty of stories about how easily things could go wrong if you let your guard down. When I moved to a larger city for work, I carried that mindset with me. I kept my wits about me, avoided sketchy areas at night, and stayed aware of my surroundings. But none of that prepared me for the night I took a rideshare home. It had been a long day at the office, one of those days where you stay late, eating vending machine snacks and staring at a screen until your eyes feel like they're burning. By the time I finally clocked out, it was close to midnight, and I was too exhausted to deal with public transportation. I decided to call a rideshare. The app connected me with a driver named Steve, who had a solid rating and a generic profile picture, a middle-aged guy with short hair and glasses. The estimated arrival time was only 3 minutes, so I stayed inside the lobby of my office building, watching for the car to pull up. When the app notified me that my driver had arrived, I stepped outside and spotted a silver sedan idling by the curb. The license plate matched, and the driver waved as I approached, climbed into the back seat, mumbled a tired hello, and buckled my seatbelt. The car smelled faintly of stale coffee, and the driver had some quiet jazz playing on the radio. He was polite, asking how my night had been, and whether I wanted the air conditioning adjusted.
See, this is why I would be scared of getting into somebody's car, like if they're Uber, because you never know what their intentions are when they pick you up.
I gave short, distracted answers, too tired to make small talk. I just wanted to get home, collapse into bed, and forget the day ever happened. About 5 minutes into the ride, I realized something was off. The route the app showed on my phone had us taking the highway, but instead, Steve was driving through a series of side streets. I assumed he was avoiding traffic at first, but the farther we went, the less familiar the area became. I glanced out the window, trying to get my bearings, but the streets were poorly lit, and nothing looked recognizable. "Hey," I said, leaning forward slightly. "Is this a shortcut or something?" Steve didn't look back at me. "Yeah," he said casually, his hands steady on the wheel. "Construction on the main road. This'll get us there faster." I nodded, trying to shake the uneasy feeling creeping into my chest. The app hadn't mentioned any construction, but maybe it was too recent to show up.
No, he's just saying that so he can come up with a cover so he can kidnap you. Oh man, this ain't looking good. Especially if the app did not say anything about no construction ahead.
I didn't want to be that paranoid passenger, so I stayed quiet and watched the screen on my phone, tracking our location. That's when I noticed the dot representing our car wasn't following any visible roads. The map showed us driving through a blank gray area. My stomach dropped. I think the app's confused," I said, forcing a laugh. "It's not showing any roads here." Steve didn't respond this time. His grip on the wheel tightened slightly, and his posture stiffened. My pulse quickened. I glanced around the car, looking for any signs that this was just a normal, if unusual, detour. But everything about the situation felt wrong. "Hey," I said more firmly. "Where are we going? This isn't the way to my place." He finally spoke, his voice calm but somehow chilling. "I just need to make a quick stop first. Won't take long." Every alarm bell in my head went off at once. "No, I need to go home now," I said, my voice shaking. "Please turn around." He didn't respond. The car kept moving, the headlights cutting through the dark, empty streets. I realized then that I had no idea where we were. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. I gripped my phone, debating whether to call the police or try to bail out of the car while it was still moving. "Let me out," I said, louder this time. "I'll call the cops if you don't stop the car." Steve's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. The car slowed slightly as we turned onto an even darker street, bordered by tall trees. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I made a split-second decision. I unlocked the door, threw it open, and jumped out, hitting the pavement hard and rolling onto the shoulder of the road. Pain shot through my arms and legs, but adrenaline kept me moving. I scrambled to my feet and ran into the trees, clutching my phone. Behind me, I heard the car screech to a halt. The driver's door slammed, and I heard Steve shouting something I couldn't make out. I didn't look back. I just kept running, weaving between the trees and praying he wouldn't follow me.
Oh, he was mad that you jumped out of the car. But oh man, he's going to be looking for you now. You better hide.
My fingers fumbled with my phone as I dialed 911, barely able to get the words out when the operator answered. "I'm being followed," I gasped. "I think my rideshare driver, he's chasing me." The operator kept me on the line, asking for my location and details about the car. I crouched behind a fallen log, trying to catch my breath and listen for any signs of Steve. I couldn't hear him anymore, but I didn't dare move. It felt like an eternity before I saw the red and blue lights flashing through the trees. The police found me quickly, and I ran to them, shaking and barely coherent. They searched the area, but didn't find Steve or his car. The next day, I contacted the rideshare company to report what happened. They said the driver's account didn't match the one I had been paired with. It was a fake, someone who had somehow intercepted the ride request and showed up in the right car. To this day, I have no idea what his intentions were or what would have happened if I hadn't jumped out of the car. I've switched to public transportation since then, and every time I step into a vehicle, I double-check every detail.
Oh man, I'm sorry you had to go through that. But yeah, that would be scary just to get picked up in somebody's car that matches the description of the person that you're supposed to be meeting up with, but then it turns out to be someone else. I cannot believe somebody was able to hack a ride share program and get the account of the driver of the car that she was supposed to be in, and then have the same car. You know, that's just fishy right there. But I'm glad she did the right thing, got out of that car and called the cops. But yeah, that was crazy that they can't find him.
It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend. My boyfriend Alex and I had booked a secluded cabin in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. The idea was to unplug from our busy lives, enjoy the quiet, and spend time together without the distractions of work or social media.
That would sound like a good vacation.
The cabin was cozy, but simple. A single-story wooden structure with big windows and a small porch that overlooked a dense forest. We arrived on a Friday afternoon, the sun already dipping below the tree line. The first night was uneventful. We cooked dinner, played cards, and laughed about how overly dramatic horror movies made cabins in the woods seem. The second day, we decided to explore the trails around the property. The woods were thick, and the trails were more like barely visible dirt paths weaving through the underbrush. We didn't see another soul all day, which felt both freeing and eerie. It wasn't until late afternoon that I noticed something odd. About a mile from the cabin, deep in the woods, we came across a strange clearing. In the middle of it stood an old, rusted pickup truck. The windows were smashed, and weeds had grown up through the tires. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. "Weird place to leave a car," I said, stepping closer to examine it.
Yeah, that would be a weird place to leave a vehicle, but hey, there's a bunch of people nowadays dropping off old cars in the woods just to let them rot to the ground. But I don't know, this one just being all by itself is sort of suspicious.
Alex shrugged. "Maybe someone got stuck and just left it. Looks like it's been here forever." As I circled the truck, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Hanging from the rearview mirror was a small, weathered doll. It was handmade, its body sewn from burlap, and its head crafted from some sort of carved wood. Black buttons had been sewn in for eyes, but one was missing, leaving an empty hole in its place. "Let's head back," Alex said suddenly, his tone sharper than before. He grabbed my hand, and we hurried back toward the cabin. I tried to ask him what was wrong, but he just shook his head. "I don't like the vibe back there," he muttered. That evening, the mood between us was tense. We tried to brush it off, chalking it up to overthinking the strange clearing. After dinner, we sat on the porch, enjoying the night air. The woods were completely silent. No chirping crickets, no rustling leaves, just an eerie stillness. Alex pointed out that it was strange, but joked that maybe even the wildlife needed a break. Around midnight, I woke up to a faint noise outside the cabin. It wasn't loud, just a soft rustling, like footsteps moving through leaves. I nudged Alex awake, whispering that I thought someone might be outside. He groaned, but got up and peeked through the curtains. "Probably just a deer," he said, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. I couldn't fall back asleep. I lay there, listening intently. The footsteps stopped for a while, but just as I began to relax, there was a soft thud against the porch. It wasn't heavy, just enough to make my heart race. Alex sat up, his face pale. "Okay, that's not a deer." We crept to the window together, peeking out from the edge of the curtain. At first, we saw nothing but the porch bathed in moonlight. Then we noticed it. A small object placed on the wooden railing. It hadn't been there earlier. My stomach dropped when I realized what it was. The doll from the truck. Nope, we're leaving. Now, Alex whispered, his voice shaking. We threw our things into bags in record time. The whole time I kept glancing toward the windows, half expecting to see someone watching us. The woods outside felt alive, like they were closing in on the cabin. We didn't see or hear anything else, but the oppressive silence made every movement feel amplified. We got into the car and sped down the dirt road leading away from the cabin. As we drove, Alex kept glancing in the rearview mirror, muttering about how it felt like we were being followed. I told him it was just nerves, that there was no way anyone could keep up with a car in those dense woods. When we finally reached the main road, relief washed over me. We laughed nervously, trying to shake off the tension. That was ridiculous, Alex said. Probably just some pranksters messing with us. But as we stopped at a gas station a few miles out of town, my heart sank. I got out to stretch my legs and noticed something on the rear bumper of the car. Dangling from a piece of twine was the doll. Its remaining button eyes seemed to stare right at me. We drove straight home that night, not saying much the entire way. When we got back, Alex tossed the doll into a dumpster behind our apartment complex. We agreed not to talk about it anymore, as if ignoring it would make it all go away. A few weeks later, I came home from work to find a small package sitting on my doorstep. There was no return address. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was the doll, its button eye replaced with a shiny new one.
Okay, that was a weird incident. Because I was thinking that that doll might have been possessed, but if it's like on the porch after you heard footsteps, no, somebody was stalking you. And the fact that you let that person follow you because they probably saw you throw the doll in the trash and they got it out and sewed a new eye on to send it back to you. Oh, heck no. I'll be calling the cops to go back to that area and see if they can figure out if that truck is still there and see who it belongs to, and they can narrow it down to who's messing with them with the doll. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Terrors reactions. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.